Hey y'all, Laynie Solomon here. I'm so grateful to get to share some Torah with you that feels really close to my heart. And that's born out of deep chavruta and learning with and from fellow trans and non-binary folks. And today, for this brief period of time, we're going to dig into some thinking about halacha together and explore the notion of expertise, of power, of authority, and specifically do that through the lens of trans experiences. And when you think of trans identity and halacha together in conversation, what comes to mind? Take a moment, maybe pause this video and think for a second. What comes to mind? In my work with the Trans Halacha Project housed at Svara, I often begin learning with folks by asking this question: what comes to mind when you think about the relationship between trans identity and halacha? And many folks who are cisgender, those folks who are not transgender, answer this question by noticing points of tension, the areas in which trans folks don't fit within existing halachic paradigms. They'll answer this question by lifting up problems, which we can put in quotes, problems that trans folks, our identities, our bodies, our perspectives present to the halachic system. When I learn with trans folks and ask this question, on the other hand, trans folks will often say things like potential, possibility, creativity, noticing the areas in which our lives present new arenas, new imaginative potential for halacha, new roots to uncover. So what I want to do is go on a journey where we explore together how we can shape and create and uncover halachic paradigms that honor this potential and that nurture this imagination. And I want to start with some Torah from Robert Cover, an American legal theorist who famously drew from halacha as he shaped his approach to law in the American legal system. So we'll read a little bit of Robert Cover together. We inhabit a nomos, a normative universe. We constantly create and maintain a world of right and wrong, of lawful and unlawful, of valid and void. The student of law may come to identify the normative world with the professional paraphernalia of social control. The rules and principles of justice, the formal institutions of law, and the conventions of a social order are indeed important to that world. They are, however, but a small part of the normative universe that ought to claim our attention. No set of legal institutions or prescriptions exists apart from the narratives that locate it and give it meaning. For every constitution, there is an epic. For each decalogue, a scripture. And he continues, once understood in the context of the narratives that give it meaning, law becomes not merely a system of rules to be observed, but a world in which we live. In this normative world, law and narrative are inseparably related. Every prescription is insistent in its demand to be located in discourse, to be supplied with history and destiny, beginning and end, explanation and purpose. Every narrative is insistent in its demand for its prescriptive point, its moral. So that's Robert Cover, y'all. And Cover is arguing that law is shaped by communities who give law, normative behaviors and practices, meaning. All laws are situated within a discourse that gives them meaning. The discourse is created by the community itself, the stories we tell about a practice, our memories of it, what associations we have as individuals or collectives with these practices. All of that is, according to Robert Cover, constantly shaping the law, or in our case, halacha. And in turn, it's not just a separate thing from the law. It is a part of the fundamental way of being within halacha itself. So I'm going to take a moment. We're going to do a little bit of a writing practice here, y'all. Take a moment and reflect on the following questions. If you have a pen and paper, now's a great time to do that, a little analog here. What resonates or challenges you about Cover's understanding of narrative and halacha? How might Cover's approach impact your personal relationship to or perception of halacha? So I invite y'all to push pause and take a moment and reflect on this. Many of us, especially those who hold marginalized identities within the broader Jewish community, and certainly within communities that actively participate in living and shaping halacha, we often tend to see halacha as a path that preferences objectivity, behavioral regulation, external authority. You can imagine the process of psak halacha, of halachic decision making. Folks imagine that process. They think about a person, an ordinary person, going to a rabbi, someone who's different from them, asking them a question, can I do this? Can I do that? There is something external about that process in which there's an external authority that speaks about my own life. And this has been really true for me as a trans person, in which much of the conversation that takes place within halachic discourse is about me and about people like me, not of me or not even for me. Trans folks, non-binary folks, cisgender women, people with disabilities, for centuries, many of us have been the objects of halacha, not subjects or actors. And for me, this quote by Robert Cover has really helped me see the ways in which halacha is not shaped by objectivity and formula, but by stories and commitments, be they spiritual, political, ideological, and the lived realities that we hold. These are the narratives that give halacha meaning. And so as I learn and teach Talmud and halacha, I continue to uncover principles, not just in Robert Cover, but also within halacha from the Talmud and from the rabbis that help me see myself in halachic discourse as an actor. So I want to take a look at one of those principles together, which comes to us in a story from the Gemara in Bava Batra 130, in which Rava, a leading Babylonian sage, speaks to his assembled students. And here's how the story goes. Rava said to his students, Rav Papa, and to Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yehoshua. So Rava is a teacher. He's talking to his students, Rav Papa and Rav Huna. Rav Huna happens to be the son of Rav Yehoshua. And here's what he says. When a psak, when a legal decision or ruling of mine comes before you, and you see a challenge within it, a pircha, some sort of reason to refute it, do not tear it up until you've come to me. So Rava is talking to his students. If you are encountering something that I've taught or ruled upon and you find a challenge within it, don't just rip it up. Come to me. Come talk to me. Tell me what happened. If I have a reason for the ruling, I'll share the reason with you. And if I don't, I'll retract my ruling. So just this part of the story I find amazing. Just imagining a teacher saying this to their students so honestly and explicitly. If you find a challenge with something I've taught you, come talk to me. Don't harbor mad feelings about it. Don't rip it into the ground. I'll tell you why I did it. And if I'm wrong, I'll take back my ruling. What an incredible model. Just this in and of itself, Dainu, what an incredible model of embodying humility in our teaching and in our learning. Okay, but there's even more to the story. Rava continues to say to his students, after I die, if such a case should occur, and his death would then therefore prohibit his students from being able to talk to him about what happened. So all they have in front of them is the ruling itself. Don't tear it up and also don't learn from it. Incredible statement from Rava, and he's going to explain each of those parts. First, don't tear it up. For had I been there, perhaps I could have told you a reason for the ruling. So maybe there's some validity in it. And don't learn from it either. For a judge has only what his eyes see. For a judge has only what his eyes see. What does this mean? Okay, Rava tells his students not to rely on his rulings once he's died. They, as judges, should rule only based on what they see, only based on what's in front of them, what they themselves see, not what someone has seen before them, or what someone else saw in a similar case, or what someone thinks they may have seen but could be different. No. Judges rule based on what they see in that specific moment. And this phrase appears, Ein ladayan ela ma she'einav ro'ot. A dayan, a judge, has only what his eyes see. This phrase appears throughout the Talmud and throughout halachic literature as an injunction against ruling based exclusively on precedent, rather than fully evaluating a case as it exists in that moment before a judge's eyes. And here it's important that we note eyes here is not a visual, exclusively visual experience. I think that what the rabbis are talking about is about perception, cognition, and understanding, rather than a required visual experience. And if we want to push that further, the root resh aleph yud, which is at the root of to see, ro'ot, his eyes see, the root there in the dictionary, Marcus Jastrow tells us that actually to see is about perception and cognition. So this sensory connection may or may not be sensorily rooted, but it's about understanding, fundamental understanding. And later commentators like Rabbeinu Gershom interpret and codify this dictum, this ein ladayan ma she'einav ro'ot, ela ma she'einav ro'ot. He clarifies it further, or sort of comments further, to talk about the contextual nature of ruling itself. Here's what he says. This is to say, according to what I have seen in this minute that I offered the ruling, lest in another time it would have appeared to me in another way. This principle, a judge has only what his eyes see, as it has been understood, captures the need to contextualize psak, to contextualize halachic decision-making within a specific story, experience, or set of lived and felt data. As Rabbeinu Gershom says, to see a case is to know the ins and outs, to fully understand the context. Maybe if there was something different, I would have ruled differently. To understand the full reality behind the case itself. To understand the narratives that give any subjective ruling a specific outcome, and then give that outcome specific meaning within a community. This is a powerful principle, y'all. I want to think for a minute, what does it mean to see a case? If these attributes are present in the process of making, shaping, and living law, the narrative, the context, the assumptions, the stories, what a judge has to see is not simply the information in front of her in a formulaic way. If psak, if halachic decision-making was about specific formulas that we can apply, it wouldn't matter whether something was slightly different in Rava's case than it is now. We could follow the precedent. But if we think about Robert Cover here, and this story with Rava and Rabbeinu Gershom's expansion of it, we know that a judge shouldn't see only what's in front of her. She has to see everything that cover argues is happening in law. The real, the aspirational, creative, the worlds, the discourse of halacha. In other words, a judge has to see to understand all of the dimensions of the context of a case when she's offering a ruling. This is a radical force within halacha that honors context, specificity, story, and relationship all as central to lawmaking. As a trans person, when I learned about this principle, it was tremendously liberating. So often in our communities, we're asking questions about trans people, about trans bodies, and our cisgender comrades fully can't see us. They can't share our assumptions or acknowledge the dynamic and powerful experiences with which we move through the world, learn from the ways in which we inhabit our bodies. But with this frame, with Bava Batra and Rabbeinu Gershom, judges cannot offer rulings about that which they cannot see. Remembering here that sight is about understanding and perception. A judge has to see the case fully in order to rule. And if a judge has to have the ability to fully understand a case in order to rule about it, how might we imagine this shifting? Who can offer psak about what? This principle that a judge has only what his eyes see demands that a judge must have full understanding of any given situation, experience in order to rule about it. They have to see the narrative, the context, the lived experiences, the ideological commitments, which enables us to erase objectivity, centering subjective, relational, contextual lawmaking. You could even argue further that this principle demands poskim are of the community themselves. How better to see or to understand the lived realities and experiences of a community than to be of the experience themselves? That they see not only the case in front of them, but the full lived reality that it represents. With this principle at the core of psak halacha, we might wonder what this says about the positionality of poskim. Perhaps you can't offer psak about what you have truly not yet seen, understood, or experienced, which would enable us to remove any instance of objectifying individuals' experiences, lived realities in halacha, eliminating instances of objects within the halachic system altogether. We're presented here with a way of restoring halacha to a frame in which nothing about us can take place without us, borrowing language from disability justice activists. Language and lives of the people are central. And those who are most directly impacted and implicated by halacha become halachic actors. This frame for me is such a powerful grounding way to understand what it could look like to create participation, redistribute and relocate the notion of expertise, dislocating it from external authorities and planting it right in the hands, in the lives of those who have fully seen the experience. I want to bless us with the learning that enables us to see and here to understand more fully, that helps us stretch our minds, our relationships to halacha, our eyes and perception beyond that which is already in front of us, enabling us to deepen our relationships with others so that we bring their stories in, hold them tight, and shape halachic futures that are informed not only by our stories, but by all stories. Happy learning, y'all. Happy Global Day of Jewish Learning.